What's up, everybody? Welcome on in. Another new edition of Celtics Beat. We got, just a great crew here with us. I mean, I don't know what more you could ask for on the heels of a Celtics sweep on the West Coast, other than a few guys who are just probably look hungover, but in reality are just exhausted from all these late nights. I am Adam Kaufman, Evan Valenti. You know him well, our producer and occasional host. And of course, as we like to joke around with him here, the overexposed Chris Forsberg from NBC Sports Boston. Great to have you, buddy.
What's going on, Adam and Evan? It's good to see y'all.
Good to see you. I know, we've got you on the heels of recording your podcast. Mm-hmm. So by all means, people check that out. Obviously, the Celtics Talk Pod over at NBC Sports Boston. It's okay. We're confident enough in ourselves over here to be able to promote pods that are not within our specific family of CLNS podcasts. You know,
there's so many good Celtics podcasts. Like I don't get angry. You know, like go find it. Abby's got a new podcast. Like if you got a podcast, come promote it.
Is there a certain point in time, and I'm not even specifically talking about the Celtics, now I'm just talking about the world, are there too many podcasts?
Yes.
Like, does it become a thing where, like, I remember way back when, if we want to go to, this is showing our age, but we all remember, go back to like the .com boom, right? Mm-hmm. And when Bill Simmons really became sort of the voice of the internet for the sports fan with ESPN.com and Page 2 before that, long before like Grantland and the Ringer and all that. It was like, man, like how do I have a blog? Like, and then suddenly it became anybody can have a blog. Like it's almost easier to create a blog than it is to do anything else in the world. And now we've sort of hit that place with podcasts too. There was a certain exclusivity about it at the beginning, and now it's like you could just, well, cool, I got a phone. Well, I guess I got a podcast.
Everyone's got Zoom.
I've had two people pitch me podcast ideas the last week. And they're just like, hey, we need your help. And I'm like, all right, you have no experience in journalism, broadcasting at all whatsoever. So this is going to go really well.
But maybe it would. Look at TikTok. Like
you never know.
You're just going to have an audience. You don't necessarily need to have talent.
You know what's fun? I'll tell you a quick story. Is probably one of my final few years at ESPN. They were kind of changing over the podcast. They came to me and said, we want to get you on. Honestly, I don't even know what we were calling it at that point. Hoop Collective, Hoop Basketball with Friends. Like it was going through some iterations. And I sat there, I was like, podcasting, that went out with button shoes. There's no way this is going to take, this is old and over. And then here I am. And when I dived in with NBC Sports Boston, I was like, wow, podcasting is just sort of getting going. And I was like, man, I wrote it off too quick. I wish I had a couple of Spirit Airline rants on that ESPN podcast. I think I probably should have shown them I knew something about basketball instead of ranting about the travel difficulties. But now I can't imagine, And it's funny you say that. Is there too many podcasts? And then I thought about it. And I was like, there's still probably one morning out of every week I go to walk my dog and I reload my podcast apps and I'm like, got nothing to listen to. Everyone's old and outdated. we all got to stagger it. We should all pick a day.
Yeah.
Like you guys got Sunday, I'll take Monday. Jay King and that crew can take Tuesday. Corrales can have Wednesday.
Get the Geno Time guys on Wednesday. We'll put Abby and Sean and Perk and Mark's new podcast on Thursday. Yeah, it makes all the sense in the world. I remember saying that to our bosses here at CLNS, because it's like, I'm not telling anyone anything you don't know. Like there are more than enough Celtics podcasts just within CLNS, let alone everywhere else, like yours and so on. Like, why don't we all just pick a day and just distribute that way? Because when you've got so many pods coming out in the same day, morning, afternoon, evening, it's like, there is such a thing as, like with you, we joke about overexposure, but there absolutely is like podcast overexposure. It's like, do I need 3 new Celtics pods to come out on the same day from either the same company, or it becomes a popularity contest. It becomes like, well, pick your favorite, voices in the industry. And that's the one you're going to listen to.
The best part though, is when they're winning, people will listen to anything. So let's ride that wave.
The off season, it's all about the off season, because the trades and drafts.
Off season numbers are outrageous.
So crazy
every year. They're ridiculous. I remember when I was first starting with CLNS, and we would put out these roundtable videos, and I'll make this very quick. We would get like 20, 30, 40, 50,000 views. And I was like, there's literally no basketball happening right now. And it is all speculation. And it's just hilarious. Again, that's when I couldn't believe it, but that's when you see some of your best numbers is one of the off season, and you can just talk about trades and team building. It's so much fun.
Or if you put Isaiah Thomas in the headline of this this thing, like it's gonna do gangbusters.
I'm gonna put Isaiah Thomas. That's it. With Chris Forsberg. That's it.
The number of tweets that I got about Isaiah Thomas just between the end of last night's game to where we are this morning, and we can touch on that, but it's killing me. Even it's not even just tweets, it's text at this point. Yeah. But the only other thing I was going to ask you about podcasts, because again, like you just recorded yours, now you're on this one, you know, you'll have radio interviews, like if you're comfortable sitting in all the different seats. Do you prefer to be in a lead chair hosting? Do you prefer to be, you know, on the receiving end of questions as opposed to guiding the conversation? Where are you at?
I enjoy both. I think, you know, especially as I've tried to take a little bit more ownership of Celtics talk, I'm probably a little bit protective of it in terms of like, I want to be sort of steering the conversation, but it's almost like when Scale got to do play-by-play the other night, he so used to being the analyst that he would talk up the play, be like, all right, you know, Jason Tatum goes to the bucket. And then he want to explain why he got to the bucket. And he actually had to police himself. And I feel the same way. It's like, I'll set up the question and then I want to answer the question. So I start talking. So sometimes I try to find that balance, but yeah, I try to be I'm trying to think of a good representation. Who's like the Celtics most Swiss Army knife of a player? You know, Marcus Smart, given the game what it needs. Like I probably have a really good role that I should stick to, but sometimes I just want to jack threes. So you know, we ride it.
Well, let's go right there kind of with this, because I'm going to ask you a question that I have been asked a lot in recent interviews that I have done. And with the success of the team right now, wins in 5 straight, vaulting themselves from a fringe playoff team to now in a tie with the Hawks for the 4th seed, playing really at the level that we have long expected them to. We've said all along, this is the talent ability that they have. They've just played so far beneath their level. But with the 5 in a row, win 7 out of 9, are they fixed? What is their ceiling? Where do you see this team if you're evaluating them right now?
So I always hesitate because I do ride the emotional roller coaster. Like you'll see me there banging my head against the post-game live desk when they lose a bad game in the 4th quarter. And then, you know, I've grown from I was like really cautiously optimistic after the initial wins here. Like, okay, the Knicks and that didn't do anything for me. The Timberwolves, like, okay, great. Jason Tatum had a great game, but we're talking about the Timberwolves here, last place in the NBA. And so I was a little cautious, but to go on the road, do what they did against Denver. Now, Denver was due for a letdown and clearly waved the white flag in the 4th quarter there. But even going up to Portland, who I thought played really well, they had to hose down Lillard a little bit and Marcus Smart going in there and shutting him down a little bit. And then even last night, you know, again, like there's no reason they should have even lost that 27-point lead. But, you know, look, go 3-0 on a road trip where you go out west. The Celtics haven't done that in past years. And so some encouraging strides here. I think I'm seeing what the potential is when they're healthy and how defined roles and guys understanding what they're supposed to do. Like, I think the biggest storyline right now, even as good as Jalen and Jason have been, to me, like I woke up this morning and I'm like, what do I want to write about? I really want to write about how good Kemba has been in adjusting to his role. Like his assist totals are up. His usage rate is down. He took a corner 3 last night, which he never does. I feel like whether it is the coaching staff talking to him or just Kemba recognizing like, this is how I can best help this team. And all of a sudden, like there's not 50 people in my Twitter mention saying trade Kemba Walker this offseason. And so, you know, look, they need everybody to do that. They need everybody to stay healthy. They need Jalen and Jason to continue to be great. But I am a little bit more bullish that if they do all that, if Robert Williams gets back to full health, that this team at least has a puncher's chance against anybody. And especially the higher they climb in the seedings, I feel a little bit more comfortable based on, you know, what the potential matchups could be.
If I'm putting it in the simplest terms, and you can tell me if you agree, and Evan, certainly, you know, let me know how you feel about this. This is how I've been answering the question. In its shortest form, is that the Celtics are still not a contender. Let's not fool ourselves into believing they are a championship contender. If everything breaks right, if they stay healthy, if they play at their level, if they do what they're doing, Evan Fournier comes back and provides them what they expect from him and what we've seen glimpses of so far, they are a team that could make the conference finals. More than likely, they bow out in the second round. If they revert back to what they were doing, they're a team that goes out in the first, maybe even loses in the play-in tournament. That is the spectrum for this team. But to me, they're kind of, it's funny because we had Grandy on last week, and Grandy was saying how, you know, people don't really realize this, in part because of the bubble and what was happening in the world, and maybe depending on how closely you look at it. But like that team in the playoffs last year and in the bubble in general it was probably the 3rd best performing team in the last 20 years of Celtics basketball, which is just mind-boggling to think about. And that was a team that I felt going into the bubble anyway, just during that season was similar in that they're probably going to bow out in the second round, but there's a ceiling there. Mm-hmm. And I think that came to fruition ultimately. They certainly could have gotten past Miami. They didn't. And, now people, revisionist history, look at that as losing to losing a matchup that you should have won and losing to a poor team. Like, no, Miami was a good team and injuries played into it and it wasn't good. And they looked bad because of the injuries they sustained against the Lakers. And so it changes people's perspective. But that's how I view this team right now in terms of its overall outlook as, the regular season wraps up pretty soon.
And I think that's fair. Like, and Ev, I'll defer to you here, but like, I agree. Like they could just as easily, the wheels could come off. They could lose one player. Like, I think their depth is a little bit tenuous. Like, and I'm not saying like the guys that were in at the end, like, I don't think we're going to see Carson Edwards and Luke Cornett playing big minutes in the playoffs. But, obviously, it's fair to say if without Evan Fournier, all of a sudden you got to lean a little bit heavier on Grant Williams and Shemi Ojale. And they've had good moments in this stretch, especially Grant. But the depth is sort of thin. And so if you do lose one body during this, as we see, like Robert Williams goes out, all of a sudden that depth chart at the center position is really thin. So it could come down to health, but it's a weird season and the Celtics have gone through it more than anybody to this point. So I can't just sit here and say that, maybe the balance of bad luck doesn't tip in the playoffs a little bit. And it was almost weird to see like AD and LeBron out last night. I was like, when was the last time the Celtics had their opponent had more people out than the Celtics did on a given night? So it's complete wild card, but the spectrum is just like you said, could be as early as a disappointing first round exit, but I think it's more likely they get to that second round and we'll see what Celtics team shows up.
Yeah, I we've been a little encouraged here over the past, we'll call it since April started. I think the C's are like 8-1 in their last 9. Over the past 15, they've been really great. Kirk Goldsberry, who does a great job charting these things, has the Celtics in the quadrant of wow currently in the last 15. Ooh. They're 5th, they're 6th in offensive rating, 7th in defensive rating, and they're 4th in overall net rating. And that kind of, is a bunch of things happening. They've played some easier teams, as Chris has said, the T-Wolves and the Knicks, although, they were tough. And I like the fact that Boston had to kind of crawl their way back in both games to win both of those. So that helps me. Going on the road against Denver, I don't care. Like, they didn't have Jamal Murray. When you get down that big, it's still a big deal to me. Beating Portland was great. And, if they don't turn the ball over 15 times in the first half and his bench doesn't blow out, that game in LA last night's a blowout. So, but they're playing much better defense. Their defensive rating over the past 9 or 10 games, I think, is down from 113 to 106. Which is their best number, I think, of the season, I think by a mile. At least it looks like it. This team, look, I will be slightly more optimistic. I think this team's entire season has been about they haven't had their entire roster together ever, and it's April. Rob Williams has finally emerged as a starting center. They got Tristan Thompson back. Kemba looks great. And Danny said the other day, they're going to be a little bit more comfortable with it. They don't want to do it right now, but they would be comfortable if they needed to let Kemba play in back-to-backs. Smart's back and doing smart things. You have Tatum taking an inhaler before games, so his COVID doesn't affect him that well. And they're going to have to manage Jalen's knee tendonitis the rest of the way. Fournier's coming back soon. Look, Romeo is alive. So we have all that going on right now. This team finally has its rotation healthy. We don't know what it looks like yet, but it's healthy. And the numbers suggest as this team has gotten healthier, they've been able to string some wins together and string some good play together. The one thing I look for, the offensive stuff, comes and goes. But that defensive number is something I really take a lot of stock into because this team defensively has been a complete, outlier in terms of what we've seen out of Brad Stevens' teams over the entire tenure of Brad Stevens, right? This team has always been able to do defensive work against anybody. That the numbers this entire season have been absolute trash until, again, the past 9 games. So I can take a little stock into this team's performing really well. The competition, comes and goes. We'll see. But they're playing with confidence. You can see the energy is much better, but the defensive side of the floor, I'm very encouraged by. And you have like Luke Cornett as an example. And I know he might not play a ton in the playoffs. I think he's a useful guy to have at the end of the bench. I'm surprised he's more helpful than Mo Wagner right now.
Mm-hmm.
But they have
a long shot.
Right. But they have 4 guys right now that can all, do things in terms of, switch, all that stuff. I mean, again, Cornet had 3 blocks last night. That's impressive. Rob Williams does Rob Williams things. I just like the fact that they're playing with a little bit more cohesion than they have in the past. The offense, Tatum 53 the other night, Brown 17 of 20 for 40. I mean, that's good stuff. And to get back to something that Forsberg, kind of led with, it all kind of, for me, comes back to Kemba Walker. I think Kemba determines how high the ceiling is. I think this team wants to be the 4 seed, get a young Atlanta team in the first round. And then if you're Philly, I mean, the one team you kind of don't want to see is a team that's kicked your ass the past couple of years. And then if you could somehow get by Philly, you have a Nets team that we have no idea what's going to look like despite their historic run. So I'm a little more optimistic. I don't think they're going to win a title, but I'm feeling way better today than I did about 2 months ago. I'll tell you that right now.
Evan coming in hot. All right, so here's the podcast title: Valente, Celtics in finals, maybe should sign Isaiah Thomas.
Yeah, that's it. Lock it in right there.
Yeah,
king of content there. Chris Forsberg's got me out. There it is.
SEO.
Chris, I want to talk about something that a lot of people have been talking about, which has led to all of the nonstop Isaiah Thomas tweets that have been out there, and I've resisted to get into any sort of Twitter discussion with people who have sent me this because I don't want to. People love IT so much, the story, the person. We all want so deeply for him to even remotely resemble his old self somewhere in the NBA. Doesn't have to be Boston, doesn't have to be 30 points a game, doesn't have to be MVP conversation. Come back, be productive, and stick on a contract beyond 10 days. That's what we want for IT. Get your money, show your back. You were a hell of a story to begin with, now be a hell of a comeback story. We're all rooting for him. Good dude, despite the fact he blocked me on Twitter. Well, putting all of that aside, I feel like people don't recognize that he's not what he once was at all. Now, I had friends texting me last night saying, fine, he's not what he once was. He's still better than probably 4 people on the Celtics bench right now. You could justify, put him out there over Tremont Waters, put him out there over Carson Edwards, put him out there over, different positionally, but Mo Wagner, you could justify him being out there and maybe giving you some of that offensive spark, because the fact of the matter is this bench is bad. And I want to read something that your colleague Kendrick Perkins said on Post Game Live last night, which is just, he hit the nail on the head, saying of the fourth quarter bench unit that, again, nearly gave away an entire 27-point lead with 8-9 minutes left against the Lakers bench. Okay. LeBron wasn't out there. AD wasn't out there. You're basically playing the Lakers reserves collectively with your own reserves. Perk says, when you come into the game, you're still fighting for your livelihood. We're talking about guys who are still on rookie contracts. When you're on a rookie contract, every minute is valuable. Every possession is valuable. You don't know who's watching. It's not just Brad Stevens or Danny Ainge in the Celtics organization, but they have other scouts from other teams that are watching, not only watching to scout the Celtics and send in a report sheet, but they are watching to see other talent who's coming up for free agency so they can keep their eye on them in case the Celtics don't want them anymore. So you're always auditioning for a job in the NBA, especially when you're a third string type player. So I read that, I heard it, and I had 2 immediate simultaneous reactions, which is, one, no crap. Nothing that Perk said there is intuitive in the sense that everything that should be common sense. That should be common sense to all of us. But the flip side is, well, clearly someone needs to say it because the players aren't out there playing like they recognize that. It took Perk to call out Tatum to get him, in the right headspace. Maybe he needs to call out the collective bench to get everything to figure out for the Celtics, their reserves as well. I don't understand. And yes, talent matters, and they are talent thin when, you take out the starters, when you're looking specifically at the reserves, but they're not as bad as what we saw last night.
And this isn't the first time. I can't remember which game it was, but there was another instance where the Celtics emptied the bench and almost had to go back to the starters. And you're thinking, there hasn't been enough nights where they can get Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown some extended rest, and to have them relace up their high tops twice now isn't ideal. Now, on one hand, I don't think there will be any point during the postseason that you will need to lean on Carson Edwards and Tremont Waters and all the group that was out there. On the other hand, I'm disappointed that guys like Aaron Nesmith, who should be chomping at the bit in those instances, can't go in there and steady you. Like all they really needed was one bucket there. And it felt like they just couldn't do it. And even worse, they were just throwing it all over the place and making bad decisions. And, that happens. And I get it. Like trash time is weird. And yet, I hear Scal say it all the time. When that's all you've got, that's when you should be just so hell-bent on putting your best foot forward. So, as you said, the natural inclination is, okay, well, should the Celtics overhaul the end of their bench? And I just don't, they're not in a position, they don't have the money. They had to do some serious juggling just to get below the luxury tax to avoid that this year and having to send out Daniel Tice at the trade deadline to make that happen. I don't think you're in a position where you need to start overhauling the back end of the bench. The reward isn't great enough. Maybe something they should have considered a little bit more at the start of the year. And I think they did, just the Jeff Teague experiment didn't work out. Nesmith hasn't gotten a chance to consistently develop and his confidence is probably a little shot. And so it's just what it is. But when you have a healthy Evan Fournier, if you have a healthy Robert Williams, I feel a lot better about the ability for reserve groups to sustain. And I don't think that game even gets close if either of those guys is available last night. So I don't want to overreact to it. Now, just to touch on the Isaiah Thomas thing, no one loves the little guy as much as me. I actually had when he first got that 10-day with New Orleans a couple weeks ago, I was legitimately jealous of the Pelicans because the Celtics were so bad at that point and had such poor energy and enthusiasm that I was like, Isaiah Thomas is exactly what they need to right their wrongs and give them a jolt. 5 games later, I don't quite feel that way. And, it feels good that they've sort of organically figured out how to do it without needing that bench spark. I think the other thing people forget is, just as you said, Adam, it's not the same player. And that kills me to say, because it's not his fault, bad hip and the confluence of all that he's been through. He needs to be on a team that can give him 20 minutes a night and let him find his old ways, let him find his confidence. Maybe not his confidence. I don't think Isaiah ever lacks for confidence, but in order to get back to the player that he wants to be, he needs more of an opportunity than Boston can offer. And, he probably doesn't need to be in a place where the expectation, and I know people would say, oh, it's no big deal. It doesn't have to be old IT. I don't think that's true. I think you come in and there's this desire for him to be what he was and to provide the spark that he did. And he's just not at that spot right now. So it would be a great storybook, but right now he needs to find a team who's probably out of it, who can give him time and let him be who he is and try to get that next deal. And I hope, just like we hammer home every time this conversation comes up, I hope he finds it.
Yeah, I agree with that. The thing with IT, though, we have to remember with how does he fit with this particular Celtics team? How does he see floor time? And it's basically they've, gone through all of the avenues they possibly could to create some sort of spark. Okay, so IT, let's just see if you can, carry us for a bit. And I don't think he's capable of that, really, of doing that right now, carrying a team, trying to, make the Eastern Conference Finals. I don't see it. I mean, we all love Isaiah Thomas. Remember, the fit was a 52 against Miami. That year. It was like one of the most breathtaking games I've seen anybody, play. It was, back in the time when people could actually go in the TD Garden and make a lot of noise. The electricity in that building was unbelievable. But again, what would it take for Isaiah Thomas to actually play for the Boston Celtics? Well, it would take Kemba being bad. It would take Smart being bad. It would take Tatum and Brown having off nights, plus Fournier having an off night. So you're talking about 6 things have to happen for Isaiah Thomas to come to the game and get him the spark. So again, I love him to death. We all hope that he finds some sort of spot where he can regain his footing and become the guy, or at least some of the guy that he was when he was here in Boston. It's not the right fit for Boston, just in terms of, when does he get playing time? Then you add the money factor in, Chris. And again, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Again, I would love for it to be him, but again, he's just not going to get any playing time when the games really matter. I mean, again, they already have one small point guard that, again, tries his ass off defensively in Kemba Walker, but is a defensive liability. Remember the days when Isaiah was playing the playoffs with the Celtics? They had to basically run a zone and keep Isaiah on the wing to make him not a defensive liability. Remember those Bulls series where it was like him versus Rondo, and Rondo would just pick apart the zone, and it would be a disaster for the Celtics. It doesn't help you. Again, I love him to death. Hope he finds somewhere, but no, I'm just not for me.
You remember was it Alec Baldwin and Glenn Ross, I think, with the ABCs of sales, always be closing. Here's what I found the experience is as a Celtics fan now, the ABCs of being a C's fan is always blame coaching. And you got that again. You got that once again all over Twitter last night with the Celtics nearly giving away that lead. And it's, Brad Stevens sucks. Fire Brad. Got to get rid of it. It's like, no, the bench gave up or almost gave up a 27-point lead. Not Brad. Brad wasn't out there not able to score a basket. And Brad didn't build this team. You put that on Danny before you put that on Brad as the architect of this roster. And, but then the quick reaction is, well, someone had to sub him in, with 9 minutes left. Someone had to let it get that close before you put the starters back in. And it's just, that's what the conversation is nonstop. You guys all hear it the same way that I do. At what point in time do we need to just accept there's a segment of fans that maybe it's a vocal minority. That's what I believe it is. But there's a segment of fans that just wants Brad gone at all costs. Like, it's time for a change. Brad needs to go. And then there are the others that there's probably another vocal minority that Brad can do no wrong. And like, none of this is on Brad. And what are you people talking about? And who do you want to hire? And then there's the middle ground. There's the middle ground that acknowledges, you know what, like, Brad is responsible for some of the crap that happens, but you still probably aren't going to find a better coach for this team right now. And that's just, the deviation from one to the other on a daily basis. It's agonizing, really, is what I'm saying, Chris.
It's Celtics Nation as a whole. Like, and I don't want to loop all the rational fans here, but we do ride the roller coaster, and it's easy when you need someone to blame. He's an easy target. The coach always sort of gets some of that flack. I think it's telling that whenever we've had the Brad conversation, Danny Ainge has come out and been like, hey, he's the least of our problems. And, look, could Brad be better in some instances? Sure. But managing the bench with a 27-point lead, really not like something I'm going to sit here and obsess about at night. So, until the next gigantic college job opening comes along and someone can shoehorn him in there. He had no connection to North Carolina. We spent 2 days talking about, like, what do you go coach the Tar Heels? I'm thinking, what are we doing? What are we doing here?
But wait till Duke opens up.
Yeah, well, okay, then that might actually help. And maybe Tatum can steer him back here. Like, no, you want to coach a Duke guy, you coach this Duke guy. But yeah, it's just going to always be part of the conversation, and I think people will. Those who want Brad gone will only regret it once he's gone and they see what the flip side is. And so, yeah, maybe there's like a drill sergeant that can come in and try to maximize Tatum in a different way. But no, it's just like those things. The other thing that worked against Brad last night, Frank Vogel used like 12 timeouts in 6 minutes last night.
Incredible.
And really fascinating that they were out of timeouts and Brad still had not even called one. Not that he needed to. And then when they probably needed a timeout, he was just sort of like, let's get this flight in the air, get home, and was trying to just get to the finish line with if they just make one more basket, we're not even talking about this.
It was just all a conspiracy to get Brown to his 40 points. That's all.
It could be. Perfect.
Let's let this thing slip away. You've got to run a couple of minutes. So I want to wrap up with, we started with something fun. I want to end with something fun. So I've for giggles, for my own personal entertainment, I've ragged on you before the exclusivity of being followed by Chris Forsberg on Twitter. And what the heck, why don't you follow me? Which obviously, as you know, I don't care one way or the other. But what I did catch on TV recently that I was like, I can't wait to talk to him about this, was you being called out on television for not following Kendrick Perkins.
Yeah.
And and it's one thing when like I call you out for not following, why do you follow when Perk calls you out on television for not following him on Twitter? I mean, one, I'm sure you quickly remedied that situation, but two, what immediately is going through your head of, what is the right way to respond to this?
I think my first reaction is, how does Kendrick Perkins have enough time to tell who is and who is not following him? Doesn't he have like hundreds of thousands of followers? Like, I feel, we must have been tagged in the same post, but I could see that moment because we all have that, right? Where, you pull up something that you're tagged in the same as somebody else and you're like, wait, they don't follow me?
Yeah.
Disrespectful. And I'm sure there are people out there that hold it against me. I've tried to explain this multiple times that, when I first created a Twitter account, it was not this one. And this one got verified and that was out of my control. And so I did not want to sit there and refollow the same 5,000 people that I had already started following on the other one. So I just kind of ported over some lists. And that's where I follow everybody now. And then just as a shout out to all my NBCS colleagues, and I'm sure there's some ESPN stragglers in there too. Just a very limited number of followers. I don't even know if I have that column on my tweet deck. It's mostly just a list of like Celtics and NBA and all that. It's almost like perfunctory for me. But yeah, as soon as Perk said it, I was like, bleep. And I pulled up my phone, and right from that chair, I had to follow him. You just don't want to get Perk on your bad side, as Jason.
I've said the big man. You know what I always say to people, because I get that from time to time, especially from like colleagues, like, you're a bad teammate, you don't follow me, that sort of thing. And I'll say, like, look, and this is not an exaggeration, this is true. Like, I don't follow my mom on Twitter.
Like, well, you don't want, do you want to read your mom's tweets all the time? Like, I wouldn't want to read my
she'll text me if it's important.
That'd be a nightmare.
Moms are on Facebook, right? Like,
yeah, right.
That's why I have Facebook. Exactly.
But same deal. Like, people can make you feel really bad about that, and it's funny. Like, we as we're talking about the big story this week, obviously, is Perk calling out Jason, and Jason, you're probably seeing it on Twitter. We're all aware. We all see this stuff. Even if you're not following someone, it's out there. You're gonna see it eventually. So, I see everything. I hope.
Perk is just calling everybody out. Tatum, Forsberg, the bench. Who's next? Who's going to be in
Kaufman?
Right now that you've
next week on the show, Kendrick Perkins.
I'll say this, no, because he hasn't even done the Celtics talk yet, so there's absolutely no way that's happening. I need him on my podcast first before I let him go. So he started his own podcast now before he got on Celtics talk somehow, even though he's part of the NBC Sports Boston family. So what can you do? Perk's going to call out everybody by the end of it,
and then just tell them to carry the hell on.
Yeah, and which is great. Like, what I love is it's just unvarnished, and even better, it's hard for I think the hardest part about having a hot take on this Twitter box here is eventually you're wrong, and then I sit there and I'm like, oh man, I shouldn't have called out Jason Tatum for slow starts. He's been so good at the start of games, like then I got to kind of walk. Perk has no problem. Perk's just like, hey, I was wrong. Just carry on.
At least he admits it though.
Yeah, exactly.
People just dig deeper. They're like, no, I'm going to plant my flag even further in this particular take. Like, those are the people that drive me crazy.
Well, and it's also, and this is a much longer conversation we don't have time for, but I can only imagine how it impacts you mentally as someone who's still more of a journalist than talking head and reporter, and obviously has broken news in the past and all of that. Like, there's just no accountability in the industry anymore with social media. Like, you get something wrong, who cares? Like, nobody remembers it. There was a point in time, however many years ago, where that would have like destroyed someone's credibility completely. If you floated out a potential trade rumor and it didn't happen. Now it's just like, yesterday's news.
5 times a day I see a report and I think, oh, everyone's going to know this isn't coming from a credible source. And then we talk about it for 3 days, and I'm constantly amazed that you can have the worst track record on like what the buzz around the Celtics is. And it's just the way it is. We all have a platform. It's all how you use it. And hopefully fans figure out, like, they see it, they understand what's best. It's just gotta be diligent. Figure out who your preferred sources are.
Well, one of our preferred guests is Chris Forsberg from NBC.
Even if I'm overexposed.
Yeah. but you know what? Uniquely exposed when you're on the show, because we talk about all the other stuff that you don't have time to get into elsewhere. So we appreciate you hopping on. We'll continue on with the show for a few minutes. We'll let you hop out. But thanks for
Evan, like I said, that blazer you got in the background.
Yes, sir.
42 regular.
You're a 42? I wouldn't have guessed that. You look like a 40.
Really?
Yeah.
You can tell that through the old Zoom box.
I don't need a tape. I can just use my eyes.
Really?
42 is all right.
Well, I'm now maybe I am a 4. Maybe I've just been buying them too big.
I don't think so. I think it depends on the model too. You can get a slim model, you'd be a 42. It just depends on the jacket. Really.
What kind of butterfly jeans should I buy? Should I buy
none of them? None of them. Spend your
money.
money.
To break this to you. You wouldn't be able to pull them off.
No, that is challenge accepted.
Yeah, there it is.
All right, go boys. Have a good show.
All right, man.
Thank you, sir.
We'll catch you soon. Remember, check out the Celtics Talk pod over there, NBC Sports Boston. Chris Forsberg, always a pleasure. Evan and I roll on for a couple minutes here, and Ev, just thinking along the lines of obviously everything that we've been talking about over the course of the show, and I think the big one, and we could circle back to it. We talked about it plenty, but the big one, I think the overarching story with this team at a very surface level way of looking at it is, have your expectations changed for them now here in mid-April versus what they were the vast majority of the year when they were so often unwatchable?
I think we've come back we've come back closer to the original expectation of this team when the season started. It's been fun to watch people just come up with ideas and takes over the past couple of months about what's really plaguing this team. Twitter obviously is a dumpster fire. The comment section in this particular video section at points has become a dumpster fire. But I love all of you that comment on these videos. You guys are the greatest people of all time. Seriously, I love all of you.
Especially, by the way, I wish I could remember his name, but the guy that made the
that guy's my favorite dude. The guy that made the video calling us all out at CLNS. That guy's my favorite guy.
Love that video.
Might have to have him on at some point. But look, we've all over the course of several months have tried to figure out exactly why this team wasn't performing. I would say that we've been pretty level-headed on that conversation, although we've leaned in certain directions. I've leaned into the Danny thing harder than any other take, I think. I think the roster construction has been a problem. But what we're seeing now is what this team looks like when it's fully healthy, and the addition of Evan Fournier hasn't even really sunk in yet. He's played a few games. You see the sparks that it could potentially be something really positive. We don't really know yet. The Tatum thing, coming back from COVID, has been a real interesting journey. As someone that had COVID, I cannot imagine what it's like being a professional basketball player and carrying a team offensively and defensively every single night the way Tatum has had to do, and trying to keep your stamina going. I barely get like 10,000 steps a day, and this guy runs like 4 miles a day. So it's like way different. But he's been unbelievable lately. Offensively, he looks like he's in much better rhythm than he was. Brown has been locked in from the very beginning, and that's just the way Jalen is. He's so consistent. That's the best thing about Jalen is his consistency, night in, night out. You see the importance of having a healthy Smart on the team and what he's been able to do. Shout out to my guy, not Nick Miller on Twitter, who put this together. I'm going to pull it up right now. The numbers of Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown since the return of a healthy Marcus Smart post the All-Star break. In 19 games, Tatum averaging 26.7 a game, 7.1 rebounds, 3.8 assists on 49, 41, and 90 shooting. Jaylen Brown, 24.5 points per game, 6 rebounds, 2.5 assists on 49%, 42% from 3, and 70% from the line. Those two guys with a healthy Smart have been able to really up their games offensively, become more efficient, highlighted by Jaylen Brown, 17-20 against the Lakers last night. I like this team quite a bit. I think the Kemba thing is what makes or breaks this team in terms of how far they go. If Kemba's going to be this ultra efficient shooter who distributes the basketball, you have a different basketball team. Him realizing his role in this team has been kind of a roller coaster throughout the season. How he fits in with 2 high-level scorers like this. He's never had to do this in his entire life. You go from high school to college to pros. Kemba's never had to be the third banana ever. Yep. And now he is. He's a super highly qualified, overqualified, ask me, third banana. And he's just trying to feel himself out. So the patience that some of you have shown with this team should be commended. I'll tell you that. Adam, you and I have been frustrated to the point of saying, I hate watching this team. And that at certain points definitely rang true for me. But now that this team has become healthy, they've gotten, they went out and got Fournier, which can't be ignored. They got Cornette, who's given them some minutes, which has been great. The evolution of Rob Williams. All of these things have come together now. And as they get ready to turn the page to the playoffs, the one thing you got to do, the 2 things you got to do, keep this particular level of play up and just stay healthy. If you do those 2 things, you got to feel confident, because not many teams that you're going to play in the playoffs are going to have 4 scores like Boston does. They're not going to be able to, with the exception of Brooklyn, and I would say Philadelphia, because Joel Embiid basically counts for 2 people at this point. He's been so good. Not many teams are going to have 4 guys that can handle the ball and score 20 points per game. And that's what we get back to Grandy's point about that was the third best Celtics team in the past 20 years. And that was the best basketball any Brad Stevens team has played in his tenure. Why were they like that? Because they had 4 guys that could score the basketball. Simple as that.
Can you make the case? I mean, you just argued for Kemba, but can you make the case that Evan Fournier might be not the most important player in the Celtics? That's not what I'm saying, but right. The biggest X factor in terms of determining their ceiling, even more so than Kemba Walker, just because of what he should hopefully, if he delivers what he is, we've seen flashes of for a couple of games anyway, before obviously the COVID situation, and just what he was in Orlando and what everyone hopes and expects him to be. And especially coming off the bench, as opposed to being in that starting unit, giving you some of what you didn't have last night in Los Angeles. Could you argue that Fournier is actually the bigger X factor to determine this team's ceiling than even Kemba?
You could argue that, I think, because he's Kemba insurance, right? If Kemba doesn't have a great game, well, here's Fournier who averages, 20 a game to help pick up that slack. I just think if you have the 4 scorers versus the 3, you're in a completely different category. Now, again, do I think they're going to win the NBA title? No. Do I think they're going to go to the Eastern Conference Finals? I'll give you a maybe on that. Okay. And that I wouldn't have even entertained as little as 3 weeks ago.
I'm still going to say no, but I'd love to be wrong.
Yeah, same. But I'll enter. I'll at least let the fantasy, I'll let it run away. It's like me wishing that Justin Fields is the Patriots quarterback in 2 weeks.
There you go.
I'm trying not to let that particular fantasy enter my brain, but at certain points, my brain's going to run with that. I will allow myself to get very excited about a potential deep playoff run and the Celtics making the Eastern Conference Finals for the 4th time in 5 years. I do think that Philadelphia is better this year, but I think when it comes to your question about Fournier, you could easily make that argument because he's that Kemba insurance, and the bench is where we've seen the Celtics really struggle against other teams throughout the regular season this year, right? The problem isn't the Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown thing. It's the problem when those guys aren't on the floor. What do you do? This team falls apart. So if you want to argue that, I could see that argument being valid just because they're a complete dumpster fire when they don't have both the Jays on the floor together. When one goes off, their numbers go way down. It's a way for one of the Jays to stay on the floor and still be a competent offense. So you can make is that what you're arguing? If you think that Fournier is actually more important than Kemba is?
I think he is we're quibbling with the semantics of the definition of important, right? So I'm just going to label it this way. I think he's the bigger X factor. Because I just think that, short of all of a sudden Kemba coming off the bench, and I don't think that's going to happen. So I just think the biggest hole, the biggest uncertainty on this team, and last night was not a prime example of it because, again, you were still thin, but it is an example of it, is what you're going to get more often than not, on a nightly basis, almost without fail. What you're going to get out of Tatum, out of Brown, out of Smart. And I'm a believer in this recent trend of Kemba. I think he's getting more comfortable. Obviously, he's that much further removed from minute restrictions and having to sit games out, and obviously just the knee injury in general. I think that I'm not saying Kemba is going to do what he's done the last 5, 6, 8 games, whatever, on a nightly basis, but we're going to be closer to that than we were at the start of the year when he came back. So the bench, though, Pritchard, who's admitted he hit a rookie wall. Neesmith, you don't know what you're getting out of him. Langford, you certainly don't know what you're getting out of him. I think he can contribute defensively. Offensively, who the hell knows? Thompson and Williams, let's just operate on the basis of Robert Williams being healthy. So Thompson's going to come off the bench. He's, what you're going to get out of him, but again, he's not going to give you double figures in scoring on a routine basis the way he did on many of those Cavs teams. Grant Williams has just been, a mirage of what he once was, or if that's even the right way to put that. So it's like you need to be able to drill in on a guy who's going to give you a consistent 15, 17 points a game off the bench. If Fournier can be that guy, coupled with what you expect to get out of your starting lineup, then yeah, I would argue that Fournier is someone who not only can but will win you a playoff game here and there, and would be the difference between we're going out in the second round versus we're going out in the conference finals.
Yeah, I think that's important to note, that his, not just his scoring ability, but his way to move the basketball. And that's the thing I think we've missed with him being out. Like, we all know he could score. I mean, you saw what he hit his first 10 threes or whatever, or 10 threes in a row after going 0 for his first game.
Yeah.
You see the offense there just from a shooting, capability. We've all known that for years, that Fournier can really shoot. The thing that you don't see is the way that he moves the basketball and his, offensive IQ, and how that affects the team and how that makes everybody else's life easier. And again, that Gordon Hayward spot that they surely missed, Fournier can fill that quite nicely. And not
Hayward
just
light, as everyone's been calling him.
Right. Not just as a shooter, because, remember, Hayward was the most efficient player in the NBA last year, given the minutes he was given. Right. But a part of Hayward was the ability to have a guy that can create with 10 seconds on the shot clock, when, again, your two best creators are on the bench. And that's really valuable. And how Fournier fits as a moldable piece. He can be a ball handler. He can be a wing. He can guard defensively a multitude of guys. That guy is very valuable, and his versatility, to your point, might make him a bigger X factor than Kemba. Kemba's a guard, right? And just, by size, by his ability to do things, like, he's just a guard. But you have a guy in Fournier who can be a little bit more moldable and kind of be sort of a chameleon in terms of, he can change this when we need him to be there. He can change this when we need him to be there. So you could make that argument, and maybe I'm wrong on this. And I will accept it to be wrong. And look, I agree with you. I think Fournier in the playoffs is going to be really important for them. He's a huge part of what their future is, not just this year, but I think in upcoming years, if they can find a way to re-sign him and keep him in Boston. I mean, I think Danny acknowledges, like, yeah, we lost Hayward this year. That's a huge reason why we stink. That's a huge reason why everybody's mad at us. We just don't have that particular guy on the team right now, and we didn't draft him. Yeah, I mean, that can be a way to salvage this season and get things going in a better direction. But Kemba, if you just remember early Kemba before the All-Star break, he was breathtakingly good. And I'm not sure if we're ever going to see that player again. I would love to see that guy. But
you're talking last year.
Right. Yeah, talking before the All-Star break, before that
pandemic.
Yeah, before the pandemic, before that knee injury, he was unbelievable. He was an all-star. He was tremendous. If they can find, because you look around, not too many teams have a guy like that can really score on you in bunches. And Boston might have 4 of them, or at least 3 of them. And those are what the upper echelon teams have. Look around the East, Kyrie, Durant, and Harden. Nobody's going to match that firepower. Nobody. Just going to tell you right now, nobody's got that. But you have Philly, Tobias Harris, Embiid. Offensively, I don't throw Simmons in there because Simmons offensively is very weird. You have, the Milwaukee Bucks with Drew and Giannis and Middleton and somebody else that will kill the Celtics, whether it's Brook Lopez for a game or Bobby Portis and his ridiculous eyes for a game. Maybe DiVincenzo gets up. But the way that Boston can kind of navigate those waters, you can make the argument that Fournier is more valuable to them. I just think the way Kemba fits in and what we've seen from him in the past, if they can find a way to get that guy, it'd be amazing, in my opinion.
This show, once again, is powered by betonline.ag. Go to betonline.ag today. Use the promo code CLNS50 for a 50% sign-up bonus. You know what, Ev? I mean, maybe, and I don't believe this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Maybe Boston's just back. Maybe the pandemic was not only an aberration for the world, but an aberration 2020 for Boston sports, because the Red Sox, the Celtics, the Bruins, they have won 18 of their last 20 combined games. I think it's like 22 out of 26, as a matter of fact.
We're back. We're all the way back.
All's right in the world, man. They're back.
We're all back.
We didn't know what to do with ourselves. And take your guy Fields. Everything's good.
We didn't know what to do with ourselves. All this losing. It was just too much. Pats go 7-9. It was a miracle they went 7-9.
It literally destroyed the world.
Yeah, right. It's just a coincidence. Is that what you're telling me? No. Yeah, no. It just feels good again, man. It feels good. Sox are kicking ass. Pats could get the best QB in the draft, not named Trevor Lawrence. Celtics, just the vibes are good. And the Bruins have replaced Tyler Seguin with the guy that went before him with Taylor Hall. I mean, life's not bad, you know.
I mean, goal scorer Taylor Hall.
Right.
Hey, Tuukka Rask out here winning 300 games. I mean, come on, it's easy. All's right in the world again, you know.
Yeah, and New York's having a tough time right now. So I feel
see you on the parade route this summer. It's going to be great.
Tough boats aplenty, boys and girls.
All right. Thanks to Forsberg once again. Ev, I'm Adam. And of course, join us next week when hopefully we can talk about more wins. I'll tell you, the upcoming schedule certainly favors that possibility. You got a tough one tomorrow night, Saturday against the Warriors, but it is at the Garden in front of fans. And then you got the Bulls on Monday, Thursday, the Suns, and maybe we'll even touch base before then during that Tuesday, Wednesday break. And if not, certainly in the immediate, right around that scope of time, because regular season, it is winding down, folks. We got ballpark 15 games left. Going to be interesting, but keep on rooting them on. Let's see some more wins. And you Celtics fans out there with your ABCs, you just keep it up. I'm here for it. Keep feeding me on Twitter. You know where to find us. Here's something I haven't mentioned in forever, by the way. If you're still listening, give us a rating, a review on iTunes. We appreciate it. I'm going to start to say that off the top of the show, so maybe people actually do it. We'll see you later.
Right.